Assalamu alaikum. Hope you all are fine. In this video, we will learn about the Sn1 and Sn2 reaction mechanism. So, firstly, we will see the Sn1 reaction mechanism, and in this mechanism, it is a two-step mechanism, and its first step is a rate determining step, that is a slow step in which the leaving group will leave, and the remaining is the carbocation intermediate. So this intermediate then react with the nucleophile, and the nucleophile when attack on it, it will form a bond with the nucleophile. So basically Sn1 is a unimolecular first order mechanism, and its rate depends upon the concentration of substrate. It is depends on the concentration of substrate. That's why because the reaction only the starting point is the substrate, and this reaction will depend on the substrate. So its rate is constant, that is k, and in the bracket there is a substrate, so its rate will depend upon only a substrate. And if the substrate doubles, rate doubles, and nucleophile has no effect on its rate, because in the first step only substrate take parts in this reaction, so its reaction will only depends upon the substrate. The next one is Sn2 reaction mechanism, and it is a biomolecular nucleophilic substitution reaction, and it is a single step reaction, and it is a second order reaction, and the concentrated reaction, new bond forming and the old bond breaking at the same time. So its rate will depend upon the both factors that contribute in the reaction, that are nucleophile and the substrate. Okay. And in the when the nucleophile attack on the substrate, and it will form a temporary bond, that is the attaching of nucleophile and the leaving of the leaving group. So basically at the same step, the new bond is forming and the previous bond is breaking to the formation of final product. So in the Sn2 reaction, the leaving group leaves and the nucleophile will attach at the same time, and it form the unstable transition state that contains both the bond with the nucleophile and the leaving group. So at the same time the leaving group leaves, and the nucleophile will form a bond with the carbon of alkyl group or substrate. So it is the final product, and the leaving group leaves, and the new bond forms with the nucleophile. So in the next slide we will see the difference between the Sn1 and Sn2 mechanism. That is a very important question in the board exams. That is the difference between Sn1 and Sn2 reaction mechanism. So there are some differences between them, major differences, that are the Sn1 mechanism is a unimolecular reaction, as only substrate will take part in the reaction firstly. And as in Sn2 reaction mechanism, it is a biomolecular reaction in which the first step that contains a nucleophile that attack on the substrate. And the next difference is it follows a first order kinetic mechanism, Sn1 reaction, and in Sn2 reaction mechanism it follows the second order kinetic mechanism. And its third point is Sn1 mechanism involves two steps. The one is the rate determining step, that is the slowest step, in which the substrate, the leaving group leaves the substrate, and in the next step the nucleophile attack on the substrate and forms a bond. And in Sn2 mechanism, it is a single step mechanism in which the leaving group leaves and the nucleophile will form a bond with the substrate at the same time. In Sn1 mechanism, the rate of reaction depends on the concentration of substrate. As you can see, the concentration of of substrate, and in Sn2 mechanism, the rate of reaction depends on the concentration of both the substrate and the nucleophile. As the reaction starts with the substrate and the nucleophile, and it will uh, depends on both factors. And in the Sn1 mechanism, it only depends upon the substrate. So basically, in the first step, substrate is the first to start the reaction. So the next point is in Sn1, as the leaving group leaves, the substrate forms a carbocation intermediate. As you can know that in Sn1 mechanism, when the leaving group leaves, it will form a the alkyl group or substrate form a carbocation intermediate. And in Sn2 reaction mechanism, the reaction happens in a single transition state. So basically, the intermediate that forms is unstable, and it's the transition state in which the leaving group between the substrate and the leaving group, the bond is breaking, and between the nucleophile and substrate, the bond is forming. So it is known as a transition state in which both leaving group and nucleophile are attaching to the substrate. And it in Sn2 mechanism, it happens in the single transition state. But in Sn1 mechanism, first in the first step, leaving group leaves, and in the next step, nucleophile attack and forms a bond with the substrate. So this is the Sn1 and Sn2 reaction mechanism. Thank you so much. Allah Hafiz.